Hello, listeners. If you've enjoyed these narrations, please click on that like and subscribe button. I found a weird book. Now I might be in danger. Okay, so I have a bunch of junk in the basement that needs to be organized. Free time is a luxury I don't often have, but there were a few hours I could spare and decided to cash them in on this. Everything was going fine, and the minutes ticked by quite fast. It was nearing 7 p.m. and most of the boxes had been rummaged through, their contents segregated into keep and toss piles. It even felt nice to see the small room appear spacious with less stuff cramped in there. I only had an hour before I had to leave for work, a late night pet sit a couple miles down the road. It's a side hustle, so I told myself I'd go through one more box and then call it quits. There wasn't anything particular about the box I chose, just that it was nearest to me and not taped shut, which I thought was odd at first glance since I always tape my boxes closed. But I figured I had opened it on one point and forgot to reseal it. My brain a scrambled eggs most of the time. As I unpacked what was inside, old stuffed animals from when I was a kid, destined to move from house to house with me because I have a strange abandonment issue at the mere thought of getting rid of them. Carefully putting everything into the keep pile, I noticed a book at the bottom of the box. The ashy hardcover was blank, no title, no author, nothing. It was strange that a book would be in a box full of toys. I wondered why I hadn't packed it with my other books. Nonetheless, I picked it up and inspected it. Peculiar bare appearance, trying to remember when I had even bought it. The pages were cream-colored, thick, not out of the ordinary for a book, and like the cover, there was no title, no author, not even a copyright statement on the inside. Curiosity kills my better judgment on a good day, so I flipped to the first page. Written in and at the center was a 2-line stanza. Ignore the knocking at your door. Keep the light on and it'll stay away. Now I didn't think anything of the prose. It's a book, you know. Stories are stories, and I'm a fan of horror stories anyway. What struck me was the chosen font, or lack thereof. It looked more like someone had used their fingernail to engrave each letter into the page. The lines varied in thickness, their lengths were uneven, and the ends were jagged. I ran my finger over the sentences, half expecting there to be divots as if the words were truly carved by hand. But in spite of its rough, unsettling appearance, its surface was as smooth as the rest of the page. I followed to page 2. The next stanza was written in the same font with the same format. You'll hear a familiar plea and scream and cry. Don't give in. It continued like this, these strange, short stanzas on each page, all in the same scratchy font. Don't search for it. It has already found you. There's no use hiding. It knows where you are. The day is your friend, for shadows reside only in the dark. Then something faint at first caught my ear and stopped me short of going to page 6. That was when my dog started to bark. In a rush, the book came with me on my journey upstairs, following the sound that grew louder and clearer the closer I trode. Someone was at the door, knocking in a succession of 3 with a brief pause between each set. My Yorkshire Terrier, Scout, was already there, barking and growling, tail and ears erect, small body shaking. The sound became abrasive the longer it went. I hurried over and flicked the porch light on, but when I opened the door, the mudroom, now bathed in a yellow glow, was empty. I contemplated opening the outside door and settling a peek through the glass. No one was there. Everything went silent. I closed the door and turned off the light. Scout had quieted, so I assumed all was well. Both she and I took leave on the couch. Only my eyes were glued to the book in my hands. I went to page 6. Once you let it in, it'll never leave. Don't. The knocking arose again, and my head snapped towards the door, Scout growled. Like before, I turned on the porch light. The knocking ceased, and when I checked the mudroom, again nobody was there. This time I went outside. I even hollered, but nobody answered. Nobody revealed themselves. I went back in and shut the door and turned off the light. I didn't make it back to the couch before a high-pitched whine stole my attention. It was like a dog's whine, and then a bark. I frantically scanned the living room. Scout wasn't there. She must have ran out when I had the door open. My heart was in my throat. I didn't even turn the light on. I was so worried. I threw open the doors and beckoned her. The whining stopped. I was surrounded by darkness and silence, and a shiver I couldn't explain touched my spine. I called for Scout again, and a whine came from behind me. Scout was standing in the doorway. She was inside the entire time. Did I hear somebody else's dog? Something didn't feel right. I ushered her back in and locked the door. But as I did, I saw something in the corner of my eye. Something standing just beyond the entrance to my roommate's bedroom. Even in the darkness of the room, its figure was distinct, like a person. When I turned, though, there was nothing there. I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, so I shook it off and sat on the couch. My gaze then drifted to the open book before me. Once you let it in, it'll never leave. Don't close your eyes. Don't fall asleep. Then I watched Scout walk over to my roommate's bedroom, unprompted, stand just outside of it and start to growl in the blackness. I'm terrified to check the room, but she won't leave it. I don't know what I should do. Look, this might sound strange to all of you, but the dogs have been acting very odd lately. This all started 2 days ago when a bright light flashed across the sky and woke me up. I'm a light sleeper, by the way, so a lot of things can easily wake me up. I woke from my bed as it crashed to the floor, scaring my cat. I don't own dogs as I'm highly allergic to them. As I kept to the front of my house, I saw every dog in the neighborhood just staring blank-eyed into the night sky. How they got out baffles me to this day, but what happens next just scares me. Like a command was given out to them, they all suddenly turned and started staring at me. The most unsettling thing being that they were all smiling. I slammed the door shut and ran straight to my cat and hugged her. I didn't get much sleep after that, but when 6 a.m. rolled around and I heard a knock, it startled me. Being half awake and drowsy, I strided over to the door to greet my neighbor, Sarah. She was a beautiful woman in her 20s, with long wavy red hair and 2 gorgeous black eyes. If only I had the courage to ask her out, I thought. Hey Sarah, what's up? Hey Jack, have you noticed anything strange lately? I looked at her, puzzled. I didn't want to tell her about the strange incident with the dog, so I told her that I only saw a strange light the other night. She just sighed and told me goodbye. As she was walking away, I saw a dog from across the street grinning at me. I stared at the dog for a good while until a neighbor walked past and the dog stopped. Over the course of a day, I noticed that the neighbors who owned cats all lost them under mysterious circumstances. This made me panic very much, as I didn't want my cat to disappear on me. So I bought a security kennel to put her in at night. I thought she might be safe, but then last night one of the dogs got into my house. I woke up to a massive sneezing fit when I realized what's causing it and ran downstairs towards my cat to see a 3-headed German shepherd clenching my cat between his jaws. I panicked and grabbed the nearest thing and I hurled it at the dog monstrosity. To no effect though. It caught it between its grotesque teeth and one of its heads and dropped it between its feet. It grinned at me as it turned around and let out a massive bark that shook me to my core. Heartbroken and still sneezing heavily, I ran over to the front door to see that 10 or so other monstrous 3-headed dogs all sitting in a circle with my cat in the center. They all howled a creepy tone, and soon a massive black 3-headed dog with eyes of fire came in and snatched my cat away. I let out an audible gasp and all the dogs quickly turned towards me, grinning. I slammed on the door, locking it. I ran up to my room and hid myself, hoping that the dogs would not bark or break down the door. I started sneezing, and dread took over my body. I looked out from under my blanket, and sure enough, there stood a three-headed pit bull grinning and drooling at me. As on cue, the grinning faces all turned into a horrific snarled expression. But before it could pounce, howling could be heard and the pit bull perked its ears and left. I looked over and saw that it was 5 a.m, and I sighed in relief. I heard another knock on the door, and again it was Sarah, this time looking very upset. She had told me that her cat had gone missing, and the dogs are acting strange. She had also mentioned that when her cat went missing, she checked the video camera and saw a massive three-headed black dog on her outdoor camera. Just before another three-headed dog jumped up and tore the camera down. I comforted her and told her the same night my cat had also disappeared. I invited her in for some drinks. We chatted for a while, and I found out we loved pretty much the same things. We became too intoxicated, and soon we forgot the time, and it was around 5 p.m. and the sun was setting when we heard the barking. Both of us sobered up extremely quickly and peeked through the window. It looked like all the dogs were in the streets howling at something when the big massive dog came from under the ground, and they all wept into submission. The mighty beast gave out a massive bark, shaking the entire neighborhood, when suddenly one of my neighbors came out dazed and in a trance and stood in the middle of the street. The beast let out another growl, and the woman looked around confused and let out a scream after seeing the massive beast. The dogs turned his head and growled on cue, and all other dogs leapt on the woman, tearing her shred from shred, spilling guts and intestines all over the place. Sarah and I both hurled at the sight. "We can't live here anymore." I agreed with her and retorted, "Where are we to move? I don't have any other place than this." "My grandfather has a spare house in the woods far up to the north. We can live there and get away from this mess." I started to fluster and blush at the suggestion of that, but it was taken away when another scream could be heard. We both looked out to see our neighbor John getting torn shred to shred as well. "It's now or never." I reluctantly agreed. I decided we'd take our car and sneak out while the dogs were ripping apart another person. We both heard screaming as the dogs ripped apart another one of our neighbors. She held my hand and knelt down, heading towards the car. The screaming became louder as we exited the house. We both tried to keep our stomachs from hurling from the sounds of bones and guts being chewed into. We both froze in panic and looked towards the dogs. All of them, including the big one, were now staring and grinning at us. With a loud bark, all the dogs started to run the 5 meters left, and just before the dogs could tear into us, we managed to open and shut the doors and started the engine. As I put the car into reverse, we heard the crunch of dog bones being broke under the car and the whining that followed. I floored it and never looked back.